Hello mate, and welcome back to a exciting, long-awaited Let's Render episode. It's been a minute since I did this, but let's do it. So I haven't really got a plan for today, but what I was thinking just now was that we could do some kind of little platform of the character standing on it, and we could set up the lights to look like it's a product shot. So it kind of looks like it's a 3D printed model or something like that. So that won't be too much hassle. As you can see, I've already loaded the character into the scene to make sure that no electronic nipples get shown on YouTube, lest I end up getting demonetized. So first thing I want to do is decide on the size of the platform that she's going to be on. So what I'm going to do is kind of create a primitive, and it's going to be a cube. And I think 3 meters might be pushing it. Let's just go with 2, and divisions only needs to be 1, accept. And then we're going to have to make some adjustments. So the first thing we need to do is drop the scale down in the y-axis. It's 2 meters tall. I want it to be about 20 centimeters. So that means 0.01. No, that's the wrong. Sorry, my math is terrible. 0.1. There we go. Considering I'm actually teaching it, it's there we go. Oh no, it's percentage, isn't it? Good lord. There we go. Right, 1%. That's what we want. Cool. So we're going to bring this down. I could just go up to here and go move to floor, and then that's that done. But what I want to do is actually want to put this below the floor so that she is completely there. So if we go to Y translate, bearing in mind that we are working from middle here, so we just need to frame up. So I'm just going to switch to any left front view, side view, it doesn't really matter, and then make sure that I frame up on the right object. And now we can actually use our slider to make sure that this is bang on below where it needs to be. And as you can see, minus 101 is exactly where we want to be. And as you can see, the character is now standing straight on top of our object. Cool. So in my render settings, I'm going to turn off draw floor, which will enable us to be able to use it like this so that we don't get the floor cut out of the render. So I'm thinking this is a pretty good sized platform to start with, and now I can put some niff-naff and trivia on here. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of the tick on the cube so that when I hover over it, that doesn't happen. So I'm thinking maybe I'll do a little kind of outdoor thing. So I'm going to look for a bench in my content library, and we'll see what we get. And I get a number of bench options, so I'm just going to choose the first one that springs to mind. The first one that looks vaguely like I can use it. This one looks okay, provided that it actually fits. Look at that, bang on. Almost perfect in size. So I'm just going to drag that, and I'm going to bring it to the back of the scene. I'm not really decided yet whether or not she's actually going to be sitting on it, or if there's going to be something else that she's going to be interacting with. She might just be posing in front of it. I also now want some kind of plant, so I'm just going to search for plants and see what I can find. Let's have a look at this one. That's a little bit on the large side, but we can always remedy that by dropping it down in scale. That looks a bit more like it, and then we can drag that over into this corner. It's actually got anything that it is standing on nothing. Actually, that's no good at all. So we'll delete that and we'll find another one. It's all very well and good making these props, but you kind of have to be standing on something. Plants don't just hover in midair. At least not anywhere I've been. Okay. So maybe some kind of planter. I've got a bunch of planters here. So perhaps this one will look okay. See how big it is. Going to need to shrink down again, but it's more manageable in size. So let's just go down to about 30%. Bring it over to here. And then I'm just going to frame up on it and make sure that it's down on the ground, which it is not. So again, we can go to move to floor here. And that has moved the pivot point to the ground. Yeah, we're good. Cool. So now I can move that into position. I'll just pop that there. I might actually rotate it a smidge as well, just so that it's not too uniform. That's cool. That'll work, I reckon. Yep, that's going to work for me. So now what I want to do is perhaps change the surface on the top of my cube. So I'm actually going to turn the selection back on, and I'm going to change to my surface selection tool, and I'm going to change my selection mode to marquee selection perhaps. No, drag selection will work actually, that's fine. And then selection type will be polygon selection. So I can just make sure that I'm not selecting too many faces there. Yep, I only want the top surface. And now I'm going to search for some kind of shader. I'm thinking maybe gravel would be appropriate. So I'm going to search for gravel. And I have to do that in the correct option. I did that in my smart content. That wasn't very silly. Weeds and gravel material. Maybe. Let's just go into my surfaces pane. First thing I have to do is geometry editing, geometry assignment, and I have to create a surface from selected. And we'll just call this gravel. There we go. So now we've got that surface there. If I just double click on that material, I don't know if it did it then. There we go. No, it's not. Okay. Let's try. There we go. There's loads of those. So we just choose a reasonably decent brick surface that looks like it's meant to be where we are. Plenty of options here, so do bear with me while I choose the one that I think is going to suit our oh my god, stop. Right, okay, now we're going to go to our UV, which is in the geometry section. Change horizontal tiles. It looks to me like that needs to be 5 by 5 so that it actually looks right. That's still quite big, so let's go with 7 by 7. That looks a bit more like it. Perhaps a little too uniform though, I'm thinking. So let's just try, see what other surfaces. Yeah, I think that one will work better. It just looks a bit more natural. Maybe it'll look terrible, we just don't know. And now I have to, with my cube selected, choose the other material, and all I'm going to do for this one is just change the base color to black. There we go. Much better. Cool, the last thing to do realistically is to pose her and then run a simulation. So let's just go with a standing pose to start with, and we will see how it looks, and then maybe get her sitting down if that doesn't work. Okay, so that pose will work, and let's just check that her feet are actually on the floor, because that will be quite, and as you can see it's not perfect, so we need to zoom in a little bit before we run any kind of simulation and make sure that everything is where it needs to be. Yeah, her feet are mad all over the place, so that we could have her barefoot, but I kind of don't feel like that would work. So we can try taking her sandals off and see what happens. Even so, even then her feet are kind of in a strange position, but what I will do is I'll drag her down to the ground. Now I could do move to ground again here, but I kind of want her toes or the balls of her feet to sink into the floor slightly, so that it looks like she's actually, you know, her feet are soft. So it's important not to just go move to ground for everything, because that would move her that would move her so that her feet would be just barely touching. So I need to adjust this so that the tips of her toes are just touching the ground, like so. Probably a little bit more again. There we go, that's better. Now that's touching the floor. Now we've got to run the simulation so that her hair and all clothes fall into the right place. And since she is wearing clothes, I will have to do simulation run from memorize pose. There we go. So that is the simulation run. Her hair's got, yeah, that's nice and voluminous. We like that. Pose is looking good. Right, so let's just move her to a position that is going to work. Having her in the center is fine, but I feel like if we move her just slightly off center, and then we can choose where we're going to put our camera, just to see if this actually works as is. Now, what I also need to do is create another plane which is going to sit below our object so that it looks like it's on the floor, because obviously we have made some adjustments to remove that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new plane. This one's going to be about 10 meters in size, and it only needs one division, and that's going to drop down to, I'm going to say, minus 20, and we'll see. Right, so it's definitely below our object, but is our object resting on it, or is it hovering awkwardly above it? No, I think that's, yeah, it's still hovering above it, so we need to go into our side view again. Doesn't really matter which one. Yeah, you can see that it is actually quite a long way off, so we'll bring that up so that it's just there, and hopefully that actually moved the plane and didn't just move the widget. It's kind of hard to see with a two-dimensional object looking at it from its non-dimension. There we go, so that's better, and now we can just make sure that it is indeed white, which it is. Happy days. Now I'm just going to quickly jump into NVIDIA IRA mode to see how this looks in with our existing HDRI lighting. We're going to have to change the lighting, as I said, because we want to make it look more like it's a product, like this is a kind of vignette. But so far that looks okay. Pretty happy with that so far, so that's good. Now we can get rid of NVIDIA preview mode just for the moment. Go back to texture shaded mode. Now I can go into my render settings, and in my environment settings I'm going to turn off draw ground, and I'm going to just turn off the HDRI. I'm going to change it into scene only because I want to set up my lights specifically. So I'm going to create some new lighting objects now. So first things first, I will go with a... Now, I am aware that people who've updated their version of Dash Studio are no longer able to make ghost lights because you drop the opacity of the object down and the light itself disappears. So what instead I'm going to do is create a point light, and I'm just going to go with apply default settings for now. We'll select that, and then I'm going to move it up, and I will move it, get out of it, there we go, move it up to there behind, and then I'm going to, in my parameters, I can change the light from a point to a sphere, and then I can increase the size of my sphere. So at the moment it's 10 centimeters. I want mine to be 1 meter by 1 meter. So height, diameter. And I'm going to make it turn off render emitter so that it doesn't actually show the light source in the scene. And now if we go into NVIDIA IRA mode, we can actually see how bright that's going to look, how bright the brightness is going to affect it, and how soft the shadows are, and so on, which is quite useful. Okay, so as you can see, not very bright at all at the moment, so we're going to change our lumens, add probably at least 1 0. That's better, but still not perfect, so I'm going to add another 0. Right, that's much closer to what we're after, but still not quite bright enough, so I'm actually going to change this to, let's go with 400,000. 400,000 lumens, there we go. Right, first, before I do anything else, I'm going to turn off the selectability of that plane and of our cube, so that when I hover over it, nothing happens. Now I'm going to select our plane, and I'm going to go to my surface properties, and where it says glossy layered weight, that's going to be 0 because I don't want it to have any gloss at all. I want it to be a nice matte surface. There we go. Cool, right, so that's light 1. I maybe want to move it up a smidge, so we're going to just copy it. Move it. So we select it where it says Y translate. I'm actually going to change that to about 300, which means I may need to adjust the brightness of it again. Yep. So light, lumens. I'm going to change this to maybe 550. And that should compensate for its distance away. In fact, I might even have to go brighter. Let's go with 700,000. Better. Let's change it to 1 million then. See what happens there. Okay, so we're getting closer to where we need to be. I can adjust the brightness of the exposure in other ways as well. Okay, so that's our backlight. Now I'm going to duplicate our point light by making sure I've got it selected in my scene, and I can go to create or edit and go to duplicate nodes. Duplicate that, and I can now select this. Now this point light I don't want to be 3 meters up in the air. I want this one to be more like at 150 centimeters, and I'm going to move it over to there, I think, and let's see how that looks. This is our main light. It is creating what we would call a pool of light around the wrong part of our scene. So what I might do is delete that light source, and instead I'm going to move to roughly where I want my light source to be, and then I can add a new distant light, or I can add a new spotlight. And I think I'm going to go with a spotlight first, give it a try. Selecting that property there. Change my view to the spotlight, and now I can maneuver the spotlight so that it's pointing straight at our character. And then in our light properties I can change the spread angle so that it's less. That looks a bit better. Change the shadowy type, but at the moment I'm quite... Oh, I need to come back. Come here. Right, I'm going to change it again. This is going to be a spherical, and I'm going to make it... Oh, that's 1,000. We don't want that. We want 100. And now we can change our lumens. Again, let's just go with 1 million and see what happens. If I come out of the spotlight now, go back to my perspective view. Now we can actually see what's happening there. So that's creating more of the effect I wanted, but it's way too bright. So let's change that down to... Let's go with 150,000 and see if that's too dark. I think it probably will be. No, it's actually not terrible. It's not terrible, to be fair. It's not terrible. So we've got a little bit of a backlight. I feel like I need to increase the brightness of this again. In fact, I'm going to go crazy, and I'm going to actually bump it up to 2 million. That'll create a nice highlight over the back of her shoulders, hopefully. And then that will give us a nice hard light. And this is something I would recommend you guys have a really solid play around with, to be honest. Because if I was to turn dome and scene back on now, you can see that it's created... There's just too much light going on with this HDRI. Now, if I were to choose a very specific one, let's just go with HDRIs. And then I can use something to complement our lighting rather than combating with it. So I'm going to try this one. Don't know if it's going to work, but it might do. It's given us certainly something different, but not quite what I'm after. So I will come back and let's just try this one. See how this looks. Okay, so that's given us a little bit more of a fill light. For certain. Let's just check and see what it looks like without our spotlight in the scene. It's a little bit too flat. We want some dimension really from our object, but if I were to turn both of our light sources off, you can get the idea of what the scene's meant to look like. Again, this lighting is just too flat for a kind of a product shot, so we don't really want it to be our final lighting setup. And I'm thinking that that floor plane is kind of a bit too glossy, so I'm glad I spotted it. We'll take our cube, we'll go into our surfaces, and where we've got gravel, I'm going to bring the glossy layered weight right down to make it look like it's actually grass or a matte surface again, because grass tends not to be very shiny. That's looking a little better. And I'm also going to change the environment map just to a backdrop. I'm going to make this backdrop slightly darker than our plane. There we go, that's a little bit more like it. So you're starting to get that kind of product photography studio feel now, because we've removed any black space from our shot. And we can keep playing around with the lighting as much as we want. But overall, I think that's okay. That's a fairly solid bit of lighting we've got there. The character's well lit. So now we just need to decide where I'm going to render this image from. So we need to frame up, essentially. And I'm going to change the dimensions of my render to make it a square shot, because these days everything's done on the social media. So I'll just change it to square 1x1, and I'm going to drop it down to 2880 in resolution, I reckon. And then I can move this shot around a little bit more. Maybe zoom in, zoom out. But yeah, that looks okay. That looks fine. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit the render button and see how that looks. And I will see you in the next video, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you found that useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. But until then, you take damn good care of yourselves, alright? Bye-bye.